In an era when campuses across America grapple with promoting meaningful dialogue across differences, universities can and should play a crucial role in fostering viewpoint diversity. Dr. Leah Murray, director of the Olene S. Walker Institute of Politics and Public Service at Weber State University, is here to discuss creating spaces where diverse perspectives can flourish. I'll just go with Leah. Leah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Let's start here. Could you explain what viewpoint diversity means in a university context and why it's particularly important for today's students?
Right. I mean, I think most importantly for universities, and I think our claim to fame when we're doing this well, is we are a marketplace of ideas, right? So the campus should be a place where you are, through research, through conversation in a classroom, you are asking really good probing questions, that every idea is open to being, you know what I mean, just really sought after. One of the examples I always use with my students is Thomas Jefferson has this great letter to his nephew where he's like, here's how you should learn. And I mean, you know, it's got like 2-hour hike with a gun on your back, and you got to like, you know, learn Greek and Latin. I mean, there's stuff that we would not have in general education.
Which is a diversity of approaches.
Yes, right. But one of the things he says is every idea that you have, you should take it out, right, and see if, like, how do I say, if I couldn't make an argument for the other side as well as I can make my own argument, then my truth isn't really robust, right? Like, I really need to take all of my ideas out for a spin and allow other people to attack them, for me to answer what those attacks are, all of which makes my ideas better. So the university, and I would argue Thomas Jefferson, is the reason why we have public education in this country. So a little bit the university I am at, which is Weber State, which is a public university, we are answering his call of teaching us, ourselves and our students, and our communities, how to take these ideas out for a spin. So if it were the case that you came to a campus and every viewpoint were exactly the same, right? Then one, if it was your viewpoint, you're not actually taking your idea out into the marketplace to see what's valuable about it. And two, if it's not your viewpoint, you might feel oppressed, right? So you might feel a chilling effect. You might feel like, I don't really, you know, everyone around me is saying Y and I kind of see Z, you know, and I can't feel comfortable raising the Z option. So a little bit, it's so important for campuses to model viewpoint diversity, to embrace viewpoint diversity. If this whole intellectual exercise that I would argue is at the heart of a democratic republic's approach to citizenship, is that if that's going to work, the campuses have to do that well.
And I would add to that, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, if the administration is always selecting speakers who only have one point of view, then it does start to become not just a lack of viewpoint diversity, but it can get into that word that you hear more and more often, and that's indoctrination, right? Trying to teach people that this is the only opinion to have.
No, it's really interesting. I'm going to share a little story from Weber State. And so there were a group of us who were making decisions about what speakers to bring to campus. So this is about 5 or 6 years ago. And I had us all take a political diagnostic, right? So I said, let's see who's in the room for who's making decisions to bring people to campus. And I just don't want you to be shocked, Marty, but it was the answer that everybody was left of center. One of the people answered in such a way that they fell off the grid, like to the left. And I looked at that data and I showed my colleagues and I said, oh, for the love of God, please, everyone go find a conservative friend and bring them to the next meeting. So I want to say, it's not even necessarily, how do I say, malicious or that we're doing it on purpose, but sometimes groupthink works, right? So if I don't have viewpoint diversity in the room where people are deciding who's going to be the commencement speaker, right? Like all of us are going to be like, I really want to hear from this
someone
person,
who agrees with me.
And so, and there's no one in that space challenging. So a little bit, I want to just be careful and say, I think a lot of people who work in the university tend to be left of center and left leaning. So it's not that they're indoctrinating as much as they're not hearing someone say, how about we bring this other person? And then again, the minute, this group I'm talking about, the minute we brought conservative voices into the room, we got much better at being like, well, who's the right, like who's the right voice on this? Who's the right thought leader? So that, So I hate the word indoctrination
because indoctrination sort of implies a
intent,
purposefulness, right? An intent, right? So
And
you're saying it's more of a blind spot than intent.
Totally a blind spot, because I think humans, we are all creatures of what sounds familiar to us is what's comfortable to us. So we seek out voices that sound, they kind of resonate with us. I, from that experience, was like, oh, I'm going to pick some Republican thought leaders. So my podcast is full of people, right, who are conservatives, in an effort to make sure in my own private intellectual, searching or exploration, that I'm actually hearing voices that are different from mine. But I did it to inform, oh no, if I'm someone, and I am someone at the Walker Institute, who is picking people to bring, and every voice I have ever heard sounds like Ezra Klein. Do you know what I mean? And not that Ezra Klein isn't wonderful, but then it's a blind spot, right? I'm missing an entire, version of ideas that I really need to hear.
Tell me what you see from students, like in everyday practicality. Do they want to hear a different viewpoint? Are they pretty much entrenched in what they think they know? How would you rate them? I know that's like painting a broad student body with a broad brush, but just give me some assessment on, do they want to hear different ideas?
They are not even used to having political conversations. So let's make it very specific about politics. Oftentimes my students will tell me, like this semester, I do something called Constructive Dialogue Institute, which is based on Jonathan Haidt's moral foundation theory. So I'm teaching students, right, your value set might be care, someone else's value set might be sanctity. There's nothing wrong with care, there's nothing wrong with sanctity. It just means you're seeing the world totally through a different lens and you have blind spots, so it's hard to see the other human. So we work on this in class, right? And then we practice. So we have conversations about hard issues, practicing listening to other people. And students this semester wrote, the first time I've ever had a conversation like this, ever, was in this class. Some students wrote, the first time I ever had a conversation like this that wasn't with my family, ever, was in this class. So a little bit, it's not that they're not open to it, Marty. I think it's like, how do I say, the opportunities are not available to them.
Or they're not creating the opportunities.
Yeah, or they're worried about it because they've never done it, right? Like if you were to say to me, take this basketball and go shoot a foul shot, and I'm like, I haven't tried to do that in forever, and now you're asking me to do it on a stage, and then you're going to grade me? Right? I don't want to do that.
Could be a little tough.
Right, it'd be really tough. So to a certain extent, I don't think they shy away from it necessarily. They just have not had the opportunities to have those conversations.
The Walker Institute's mission specifically mentions, and I want to get this right, fostering civic attitudes and an inclination to engage in dialogue across differences. So how does Weber State actively implement programs that encourage students to engage with perspectives that are different from their own?
Right, so the one that I just mentioned. So the Walker Institute, I think, is probably a campus leader for Weber State University. We are the reason the Constructive Dialogue Institute lives on our campus. We've got our first-year experience students, so any student taking an FYE class has to go through this process of learning how to have a conversation with someone who thinks differently from you. So we've embedded it in the curriculum. The Walker Institute also brings different voices. So I am very mindful of who I have speaking. Does that make sense? So I will bring in a conservative thought leader like Glenn Loury, who is an economist from Brown University, is a very currently at the Hoover Institution. I had him last year. And then this year I had Charlie Cook, who does the Cook Political Report. Both, Charlie's probably left of center. Professor Loury is definitely right of center. But then we have Constitution Day programming, and they talk about why it matters, whatever issue that they wanted to talk about. And so students who are left of center see themselves in the room when Charlie Cook is talking. When they're right of center, they see themselves in the room when Glenn Loury is talking. Does that make sense, right? So they can see very intelligent people having hard conversations without being mean.
Yeah. Weber State University, geographically less than 100 miles away from Utah Valley University. So any discussion about viewpoint diversity on campus is going to need to touch on the Charlie Kirk shooting that happened here in our state. How is Weber State navigating these complex issues while maintaining its commitment to viewpoint diversity? When it comes to, hey, sometimes you can bring someone and they come with people who may so vehemently disagree with what they're saying, that you may have a security issue.
Right. Oh my gosh, isn't that the hardest question you just asked me? And isn't it really, in a security safety mindset, the prerogative of the university to say, we're just not having conversations anymore. And I will tell you, yes, it's 100 miles away, like it's south of us, but a number of my students were at that event, right? So I have students.
I mean, it's close enough,
right?
Even though that may seem like a long distance,
right? But they traveled to it, and then I would argue. So one of the things. Constructive Dialogue Institute, which I'm talking about a lot, but they put out a how do you have a conversation about happened with Charlie Clerk, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit what you have to do as a campus is train your faculty and your staff how to have these conversations so you do them well, right? So that you can help students grapple and process something horrible that happened, and for a number of my students that they watched live happen. And then also, how do we manage we're going to still bring people to campus, and we're still going to have these conversations because to a certain extent, I think Charlie Kirk would want us to. I mean, what I think he cared about was campuses becoming more open to viewpoint diversity. On our own campus, it's a shift, a subtle shift in terms of safety in that I had Charlie Cook after Charlie Kirk was shot at UVU, and so now I have a police officer at every event that I have, right? So there's very present, the police being in their uniform, very present. We hosted a vigil for Charlie Kirk's death because, like I said, I had students who were very affected by it, and at that vigil we had police presence there. But we have not shied away from having speakers on campus, but I would argue we're trying to be very thoughtful about how we can make it feel safer.
How do you think having a focus on diversity viewpoint on campus prepares students to be part of Utah's civic and economic future?
Oh my gosh, how doesn't it prepare, right? So Marty, what I always tell my students is you go out into the world and there are all sorts of humans there. And they are going to root for the Dodgers and not the Yankees, and that's going to be hard to be in a friendship with them when they do that.
And both of them can be wrong.
But a little bit, right? So what you want to do, and how I talk about it with my students, is be the neighbor, right, that you would want to have. You want to have someone on the PTA who is someone who is kind. You want to have someone who you're working with at your bank to be someone who can hear you, right? So to the extent that Utah is a diverse, beautifully diverse state and has people with different opinions about baseball and basketball and, other things, right? Like how those people live in your community, they're in your children's schools, they are in your credit union or your bank, right? Like they are where you're going to be meeting with them. All of this work helps us become better neighbors to each other. And the way that I tell it, and we talked off the air, I am raised Catholic, so I've got Catholic upbringing. But I will actually tell my students, if you believe Jesus Christ was, God, or even just someone famous from 2,000 years ago, the thing that he told everyone was to love their neighbor, because it's hard. If that were easy, right? Jesus didn't tell people breathe. We know how to do that, right? So he tells us to love our neighbor because it's hard. This work helps us answer that call, right? So it makes us better neighbors, makes us better citizens. It's all to the good for Utah.
Give me an idea of how many speakers you have come in any year, and then, we've talked about how you try to balance that. How do you go about okay, I've got 2 slots, I need to get a left and a right, or where do you fit in someone sort of in the center? How do you go about that?
Oh, I like this question. So I will tell you, I have got signature events. So I've got Constitution Day, and that's always a national speaker. In the spring, I have a Haven J. Barlow Civic Leadership Forum, and that's always state legislators. And then, but on I want to say monthly. Does that make sense? I kind of have things that are going on, so I would say at least monthly. I don't balance as much what Walker does. I'm very aware of what the campus is doing. So if it feels to me like the campus and my colleagues in different departments are bringing very left-leaning people, I'm going to be thoughtful about, I'm going to make sure that Walker's signature speaker this year is more right-leaning. So a little bit, it's not balanced for me, just my department, if that makes sense. It's balanced against what I think is happening on campus. But it's funny because I do think I want to argue, everybody on campus should be doing viewpoint diversity. So I, my goodness, don't want it to be said that Walker will bring the conservatives so we can, not do that. And I don't think anyone's actually thinking that, but I am mindful of what's happening across campus.
How do you factor in where maybe the assumptions you would make on where your students start? I mean, this is a state that has a supermajority Republican House and Senate in the state legislature. So you would think, maybe you would think, I think I would be led to believe that most of the students come from relatively conservative households. So when they come there, do you think, all right, diversity to them might look like a little more left-leaning when you look at the overall? Or do you say, I can't assume what their background is and I just have to think that I get relatively clean slates and start with them there?
Right, so I will say this, I don't assume at all. I have my intro students, so I teach hundreds of general education students every year, and every semester I have them take the Pew Diagnostic, Marty, which is a very lovely, like, it's not even just Democrat, Republican, it's got like, I don't even know, 10 different points of what is your conservative or liberal stripe, right, inside of the left and the right. And what I can tell you, having done that for over a decade, our students are very conservative and they are very liberal, but most of them are what Pew calls stressed sideliners, right? So they come in just like, this is really fatiguing. So a little bit for me, it's like, if they feel fatigued from politics, then really what I have to show is, how can two people have a conversation about politics and it doesn't have to get super heavy? Do you know what I mean? Like, and it can be a pleasant experience. So sometimes you'll hear me saying, we need someone fun. Like who isn't, like someone who will come and have this conversation and model good, kind, civil, disagreement without it getting bogged down. Does that make sense? And so a little bit, I think, my students run the gamut. I don't assume that. I know it from looking at data over a decade that they are across the board from left and right to right. Most of them are in the middle and kind of stressed out about politics. And so I very much try to make it accessible, not angry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds like what you have to do is not just present them with different viewpoints, but actually go through the process of teaching them how to process different viewpoints.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, it's like they need to hear it and they need to see it and they need to be okay that they didn't agree. Because sometimes I think humans feel like I have to nod and smile on whatever you're saying. Like if I'm going to be a good person.
Or maybe even the position that they don't have to have an opinion on everything.
That's right. Oh my gosh, could we just say to everybody, you don't have to talk about everything, right? Like it actually is fine for some issues to go and you'd be like, okay.
I'll get you out of here on this one. It feels like the temperature was ratcheted up very high, and then we had a tragedy at Utah Valley University, and with that, for a while, it sort of everyone came together and said, we need to bring the temperature down a bit. For parents, for policymakers, for community members, for prospective students at Weber State, just tell me, like, where do you think we are in another 2 years? Do we stay on this? Do we ratchet the heat back up as we get closer to the next election and the next election? Or have we kind of learned a lesson from this to say, hey, we really have to go about this differently?
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know if you saw Governor Cox on 60 Minutes, right? And that poor man, what did he say? All I'm trying to do is to get people to stop shooting each other, right? And a little bit, how do I say? The emotion that was in that response, I felt that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, same, Governor. Like, me too. Like, what I'm trying to do is to get people to realize it is not life or death, right? That these conversations are decades long, centuries long, and we are not urgently finding the answer right now, right? Like this present moment isn't the most important moment, right? That we are, in a community that spans centuries. So a little bit, I'm hoping those angels, right? Like people like Governor Cox who are saying those things, and if you and I and people like us kind of echo, look, we can disagree on a policy, but how about we do it without getting angry at each other? I think we're in a better place in 2 years. That's my hope.
Well, I hope so as well. Dr. Leah Murray, thanks for sharing your insight. You can find more information at weber.edu/Walker Institute.